Wow, finally. Hello, everyone. My name is n.i.d.e., N-I-D-E, and the name of this channel is n.i.d.e.bantupeople. I understand, I know that saying Bantu and saying people sounds redundant, but it was a way to distinguish for people who've never heard of the word Bantu to understand that I'm referencing a group of people. So I had been on other social medias, and a lot of the social medias like TikTok and Instagram, fan base, Facebook groups, all of those guys, they really give you, well, except for the Facebook group, very short, limited amount of time to express, my views and my opinions and my educational content on Bantu people. The reason I did start social media content based around Bantu people is that once you Google Bantu people, there's a lot of misinformation regarding Bantu people. Who are they? Where do they derive from? Where do they originate? And a lot of that is based on European opinion. And it's a little bit frustrating for us who understand the particulars. And then when you look at the information on the internet, it's just so astounding, how the misinformation has spread. And then for those of us who live on social media, don't we all? We get people who argue with us Bantu people by again telling us who we are, and even though we are trying to explain to them, like, hey, that is misinformation, right? One of the biggest misinformations is sticking to the Bantu migration. But before I get into the whole Bantu people and the Bantu history, let me introduce myself to you guys. I am a South African native. My ethnicity is Xhosa. I speak Xhosa. I speak some other dialects from Southern Africa, and I've lived in the United States continentally. I don't live continentally in the US anymore. I live in one of its colonies. And my 20-year experience of living in the United States taught me a lot and made me understand the history and the lives of African Americans. And one of the things that we will notice is that to some degree, to some extent, South Africans and African Americans have a very similar history, not exact, but very similar. So for instance, in the United States, they had the Jim Crow laws, right? And we had the apartheid laws. And so that's the first time when I first lived continentally in the US, I realized that, wow, there's so much I did not know about African Americans. And the more I got to know African Americans, the more I got to understand who I was. I didn't understand who I was up until I learned to know who African Americans were. And I tapped into Caribbean folks as well. And so once I started learning all that stuff, I started panicking. I said, oh my goodness, there's so much misinformation. I wish people knew, some truths, a lot of the truths that are missing when you Google, when you do a search engine. Then I started to work around it, around on TikTok. And, TikTok gives you like 60 seconds, 3 minutes. And even as recently with the 10 minutes, I haven't received the 10 minutes, so I don't know. It's just never enough time to explain this Bantu information. And so that's why I decided to bring it over onto YouTube. Our African history is so convoluted, it's so mixed up, and it's made in such a way that it fits a European narrative. And because of that, it's trained everybody to misunderstand Africans and who they are, right? Because from the European perspective, when they write our history, they write it so that, excuse the noise outside, they write it so it justifies the colonization of Africa. And it's so ridiculous the way they've written it. For instance, when it comes to South Africa, the Dutch will stand both feet down and chest out and tell you, well, we invaded this western part of Southern Africa because there were no natives over there. Think about that. Think about how in around the 1600s, 1652, think about that lie that a continent of people who are at least 300,000 years old, these people from the outside can come in and say there were no people there on the western part of Southern Africa, yet there were people on the eastern side of South Africa, on the northern side of South Africa, on the central side of South Africa. But in history books, it'll say that there were no people there, so we are justified in owning and taking this land. Unacceptable. And that lie kept going and going and going. And it even goes back into the Bantu migration I brought up earlier, right? As long as you keep saying that Bantu people do not originate from the south, then you say that they come from somewhere, so that you can play with this period of saying as if it was a race, right? 300,000-year-old groups of people just happened to not be in this spot of Western Cape, which is a port, by the way. That's another thing I've learned about history. Wherever there's ports and there's access, invaders, settlers, and colonizers will lie. They never just want to colonize the central part of any land. It's always where there's ports, where they can make money, when they can make trade and have ownership of an area where there's a port. So that was a little bit frustrating. And there's people who will argue with you. For instance, white South Africans will argue till they're red in the face because they believe this lie. So we have to fix that. We have to fix that by understanding who we are. And so when I started going on this journey on understanding who Bantu people are, where we originate and where do we come from, the deeper I get into it, the more I realize it is all European perspective. It is all European history imposed on us, right? So for instance, with the Bantu migration, history always make it seem like there was a migration, right? It's no migration. There was movement of Africans. If you want to call it migration, fine. We'll stick to that. But we can also call it an exodus, right? In 300,000 years, African tribes, African people were moving everywhere in Africa, left, right, up, down, sideways. There is never one thing that you can pinpoint and say it is this movement right here that caused this. That's a lie. That is, and I'm not fighting the Bantu migration. I'm saying that it is one instance. And it's one instance that does not define the entire history of who Bantu people are. So take the Bantu migration with a grain of salt. And there's several other theories of where Bantu people derive from and where they come from. So moving forward, I'm gonna try to bring some clarification, because once you understand Bantu, you're gonna understand how interconnected we are. It's not enough to just say, oh, we are Africans, right? Because then you're gonna realize that even the name Africa is not an African name. Right? So we out here calling ourselves Africans on a name that somebody else addressed us, and that's so unacceptable for people who are so ancient and are the first civilizations of people on this planet. And so, for instance, let me give you an example. When I worked through 6 questions in trying to figure out how to decolonize a mind like mine, a mind that has been brainwashed, a mind that has been whitewashed. When you grow up in South Africa, you grow up in a white institution. You are told that there were discoverers and that we should be happy that settlers came because they educated us and they brought us out of savagery and doing things that were backwards, and now we are these human beings. Just an awful, awful way to look at us. And we raised like that in school to believe that, and believe it or not, you actually spend a great portion of your life believing that. We are raised to chase whiteness. We are raised to speak proper English. Even amongst ourselves, South Africans will make fun of each other if you don't know how to speak proper English, because it is embedded from our parents, from our grandparents, from our great-great-grandparents. And so those are the things that we have to unravel in order for us to connect once again to who we are, to the Bantu that we are. Okay? So I worked around 6 questions to understand this. And the first question that I had asked was, who were we before the Berlin Conference borders of 1884 and 1885? That is the Africa Scramble, with those European countries, and yes, you can call them NATO, when those NATO countries sat back and they decided that Africa was for theirs to take, and they put these borders, and these borders separated us by country names that are English, that they decide. And then here we are later calling ourselves by those names. So I'm South African. I am a proud South African. South Africa is not a Bantu name. That's not who we are. That's a name that was given to me. And the more I perpetuate the whole I am South African identity, then I'm really distancing myself from my fellow Africans, from my fellow brothers and sisters, because now what I'm saying is, as a South African, I am different from a Zimbabwean. But prior to the borders of the Berlin Conference, there was no Zimbabwe, there was no South Africa. We were these one groups of people traveling and living amongst each other, up and down, for thousands and thousands of years. So that was the first question. Who were we before the borders of the Berlin Conference 250 something years ago? The second question that I had to follow up that with was, who were we before the kingdoms? If you know anything about Africa, you know we had great kingdoms, and kingdoms that survived for centuries, and cultures that were built and born out of those kingdoms, wealth that was built, identity, belief systems that came from that. But guess what? Before there was a kingdom, people had to settle there, people had to build, people had to name each other, and then there was chiefness, and then there was kingness. And so kingdoms were built. But who were we before the erection of kingdoms? The third question would be, who were we before the Nile River was named the Nile River? Again, Nile is not a name that belongs to us. It's a European guy who named it what he named it, and out of that named an entire ethnic group of people out of that. And so you cannot have somebody from the outside name an important river and then select these groups of people and say, oh, these are these people, this is what we're going to call them. How are you going to call them from a name that's called Nile that was never African? So who are we before the Nile River was called the Nile? Who were we before we were ancient Egypt? A lot of our history is based on those of us who love history and understand Kemet history and can go all that way back. Who were we before that? Because we don't, human beings, because Africans are the first humans on this planet, we don't come from, zero to ancient Egypt. There's a process, there's cultures, there's lineage, all the way up to how we built ancient Egypt before the Arab invasion. Okay, so who were we before we built Egypt? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, fifth question. Fifth question is, who were we before the religions, all religions that were imposed on us? Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Bantu people precede all religions, all of them. It doesn't matter what religion you think you're going to come up with. We precede all of those religions. So if you count religions when they were born, the beginning of religion starting with Judaism, we are talking nothing but 2,000, 3,000 year old religions, things that were imposed on us by a human being that decided to write this story, right? And this includes the Ethiopian Bible too. Yes, it's the oldest. However, Bantu people are still older than even the Ethiopian Bible. Okay, all religions, we are older. We were able to survive, build, be civilized, have the things that we had before all religions. And the sixth question that I asked, because I know that someone is going to come in and say, I have the answer, I have the answer. We were Al-Kabulan. Wait a minute. Before Al-Kabulan, who were we? And so based on the six questions, that's kind of like what I want to base this channel on, and answer those six questions in as clarity and in as sensitivity as I can, because I want you to please understand something. No matter how much I tell you that this is Bantu history, I am by no means making light or making less of any ethnic group. All I'm saying is that before that ethnic group, who were you? And that's all there is to it. Of course, we are going to acknowledge West Africa's history. We are going to acknowledge East African history, Central African history. We're going to acknowledge the Arab invasion, which changed the whole trajectory of the original Africans of North Africa, right? And the lies and the manipulation that has happened for about 16, 1700 years since the Arabs, went and did what they wanted to do with North Africa, and it became what it became. We're going to acknowledge all of that. But we always have to remember, before there was ever such a people called Arabs, it was always Africans on this planet everywhere. Okay, when we came out of Africa, we acknowledge our Aboriginal Australians, that they came out of Africa because life begins in Africa. We acknowledge our Papua New Guinea family out there. That's our people, right? A lot of it. And we acknowledge we have ties in South India, right? Ties of Indians that look like me, with hair like me, anciently. And so we're going to tap into all of that and be as sensitive as we can. We are not taking away anyone else's culture. What we are saying is there's a modern culture. What we are trying to get under is ancient African history and its influence on all of these cultures. And even prior to that, who were these ancient people? Who are Bantu people? And where do they begin? And the influence that they've had. We're going to learn a lot about Bantu language and how you find it in so-called other languages that you would have no idea that, oh my goodness, this is Bantu language. There's a lot, to learn, and the complexities of who we are. And a lot of this is going to be, for the people who hear this information for the first time, it is going to be African perspective based. So I ask that you just take your time in understanding what we are trying to talk about and not jump. Anytime you feel like that cognitive dissonance, hitting you hard, ask yourself, the information that's making you upset, where did you get it from? Are you about to argue from information that is derived from European perspective? Chances are that you are. There's tons of African scholars, and we all talk very similar. We may have slight disagreements here and there, but there's a core of truth that we all understand. And I just hope that you guys come with me on this journey, and we can all learn together, and we can move forward and answer those questions to decolonize and unwhitewash and unbrainwash the gunk that has been set on us by Europe, which keeps us in a perpetual state of disagreement even now in 2022. I hope you guys enjoy the content. Hopefully, as time goes on, I'll have a better background. I will have a better microphone. And as we move forward, I don't know. I hope to make this a much more comfortable space for you. The other last important thing I want you to understand is that I am a queer woman, and I want you to know right off the bat, okay? There's a lot of people who are not queer, and they think that the type of information that I share, that I should not, what does it have to do with being gay? No, 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 no. Gay people are almost always ostracized when we talk about African history, and I know that my gay family may feel uncomfortable thinking that I am one of those people who are going to ostracize them. No, we are open over here. We talk about even the history of homosexuality in African culture. Yes, yes, there is. So if you're a type of person who is homophobic, you are anti-gay, I mean, please feel free not to come back to this channel. And just because you don't hear me talk about gay stuff as we move on, because my passion is in African history, know that I'm very, very queer, okay? And I am a comfortable and a safe space for queer people who also are into this information. I will not tolerate any belligerence and hateful comments, okay? So I hope that we can all get along. I hope that we can learn and we can do better and finally learn who we are at the core, all right? See you next time.